Hey guys, welcome back to a JavaScript series. In this video, we are going to talk about variables and constants. Now, variables and constants is an important topic. It's a building block of any programming language, just not JavaScript. Any programming language in general has variables and constants. So it's a very important topic to understand. So let's get started with this video. Now, first of all, let's understand the use of variables and constants, why they are needed for us. So variables and constants are useful when you want to store any data in memory. Memory means the RAM, not disk or something like that. It's basically the random access memory or RAM. There you can store some data with the help of variables and constants. And then later on, when you need access to the data, you can get the access to that data. And that's the use of variables and constants. Now, although the use looks similar for variables and constants, there's a slight difference between them. And the difference between them is that variables, once you store some value in variable, you can change it later on. But in case of constant, if you stored some value, that's it. Now you can't change that value to some other value. And that's the difference. Now, let's try to understand the parts of variables and constants. And with that, let's also create some variables and constants. Now for that, I would like to open Core.js file where we can actually go and do all this. So let's create a JavaScript file over here, and then let's go and understand about it. So see, there are two parts of variables and constants which you need to understand. The first part is identifier, and the second part is literal. Now identifier is basically the name that you give to a variable or constant. And literal is the data that you store into that variable or constant. That's how easy it is. Now you might ask why we need to give a name to a variable or constant. The reason is to later on access that variable or constant, or to later on modify the value of that variable. Constants you can't anyways change, but that's the use of identifier. So like if you try to think about it, you can create as many variables or constants you want in a program. There's no limit on that, right? So you can create 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to do. You can create as many constants as you want, as many variables as you want. Now in that case, the problem comes when you want to access that value of variable or constant, or you want to change the value of variable. How you would actually go and call that variable or constant? And that is where identifier comes. That's where the name comes. If you give it a name, you can call that variable or constant later on. So that's the thing. Now let's actually try to create a variable and constant. So to create a variable and constant, now to create a variable, by the way, there are two ways in JavaScript, which is strange because mostly like there's one way in every language. But in JavaScript there are two ways. One is let and one is var. Now what is the difference between them? We're going to understand that later on, but for now just understand this fact that you should use let instead of var. There are some disadvantages of var which we're going to talk about later on. So for now you should understand that let is the way that you should choose, and by the way, it's a new way to create variables. Var is the old way. Okay, so let's try to create a variable. Now to create a variable, you can just go and say let. First of all, I'm showing with let, by the way, and then you give the identifier. That's the first part you give. So let's call it something. So I'm just going to call it A, for example. And then what you do, you just go and give equals to sign, which means you are assigning some value to that variable, and then you give the value to it. So let's say 10. So that's how you can go and create a variable with let. This is the this is basically let that you have to give, and then this is identifier, and this is the value, and this is equals to assignment operator, which means you are assigning this value to this variable. Let's go and create a variable with var. Now for var, you can just go and say var, and the rest is same. Identifier equals to and the value. That's how you can create a variable with var. Now let's try to create some constant. Now for creating constant, you can just go and say const c equal to 30. So you can see even that is same, right? You just give const, you give the variable name, you give the constant and identifier or name, you give equals to sign, and then you give the value. That's how you can go and create a variable or constant. Okay. Now let's actually try to create a variable or constant without specifying literal. Now see, literal is actually optional, but it's optional only in case of variables. It's not optional in case of constant. Okay, so let's try to do that and let's see what is the output then. Okay, by the way, before that, let's actually try to understand how we can access the value of variable and constant so that we can actually see it more properly. Now to do that, you can just go and say console log, and then what you do, you write the variable or constant name. So in this case, if I want to print the value of a, I can just go and say a over here. That is how I can print the value of a variable or constant. Same I can do with b, c. That's how I can print the values. Okay, and yeah, you can also do one more thing, by the way. You can do something like this, like you create a variable d and give it a value of c, which means you are accessing the value of c and assigning it to d. So what was the value of c? The value of c was 30. So d would get the value of 30. Let me try to print this. So if I do that, you can see I get 30 inside d. Okay, so that's how you can go and access a value of variable or constant. That's how you can do it. And then accessing the value of variable or constant, you can give it the value, give it to another variable or constant. And by the way, this is the same with a variable as well. You can like do e equal to a, which means e would get the value of 10. Okay, so yeah, that's about it. Now let's try to understand creating variable or constant without specifying literal. So if you want, you can create a variable without specifying a literal value, but constant, as I said, is not possible with that. So let's try to do that. So I'm just gonna go and say create a variable. Let's say what I can create, f. So I've created the variable without giving it some value. It's possible. Now if I try to print that print the value of that variable, you would see an output of undefined. So you can see I'm getting undefined. Okay, so that's the thing. If you don't give any variable a value by default, it would get undefined. Okay, now the same can't be done with constant, as I said. So if you go and say const g, you can see it gives me an error. Now you might ask why that's the case with constant, why it's not possible with constant and just possible with variable. The reason of that is the thing about variable and constant. The difference between variable and constant is the reason. You can change the value of a variable, but you can't change a value of constant, and that's why you have this behavior. Now imagine you created a variable here without a value. That variable got a value of undefined. Later on you can change that value, correct? So it's not a problem. If you created a variable without a value, you can later on assign it a value, and that should be fine. But the same can't be done in case of constants. Once you give a value to a constant, that's the final value. And if you don't give it any value, it would get undefined, and then later on you can't put any value into it, and that's why you are getting this error. Okay, so yeah, that's basically the thing. That's how you can like create a variable or constant without specifying any kind of literal. Now let's talk about duplicate variables and constants. See, as I said, you give a name to variable or constant for identifying it later on. Maybe for accessing it, maybe for changing the value inside it. So imagine if you created two variables with the same name, or two constants with the same name, or one variable, one constant with the same name. If it was allowed, then how you would change the value? And if you try to change the value, or actually let's try to think, if you try to like access the value of it, let's say you created two variables with the name of g, for example. Then if you try to access the value of g, which one is the variable that would be chosen? There are two variables with the name g, and that's the confusion, and that's why you can't go and create a variable or constant with same name. So I can't do this, okay, because if I do console log g, then the confusion is which one would be accessed. Or if I change the value later on, I need to give a variable name, and then I change a value, so which one would be changed? That's the confusion, and that's why you can't do this. Let me comment it. Wait. Yeah. So this won't work. You can only have like one variable or constant with a name. Okay. The same can be said with constants as well. So if you try to create a constant with the same name, again that won't be possible. So yeah, that's how you can that's how you can see you can't duplicate the variable and constant name. Okay. Finally, talking about modifying value of variables and constants. Let's actually talk about it once we have covered identifier and literal. That would be better then. So let me copy this whole code and paste it over here. And let's actually go and talk about identifier now. Let's copy the whole thing over here and paste it over here. Okay, let's talk about it. So see, there are some rules for identifier. Now you know what is an identifier. It's just a name for the variable. But it's not that straightforward. You can't just go and give it any name you wish. There are some rules you need to follow. The first rule for an identifier is that you can only start the name of an identifier with the letter, underscore, or $sign. You can't start the name of a variable with anything else. So let me show you an example here. So if I try to make a constant with, let's say, this name, that would work fine. If I create a constant with, let's say, this name, that would also work fine. If I create a constant with this name, that would also work fine. But if I create a constant with, let's say, star E, for example, that won't work. Okay, so you can see that this won't work. So this rules applies properly. You have to start an identifier with a letter, and by the way, this letter can be uppercase or lowercase, doesn't matter. In this case I took lowercase, but you can also do that with uppercase. You can start a variable with underscore or $sign as well, but you can't do it with any other thing. Okay, and yeah, that's basically about it. Let me show you one last example actually. Maybe I can just do 4e equal to 5. That won't work too. Okay. Then the second rule is subsequent characters. That means characters after the first character of the identifier can have anything among this: digits 0 to 9, A to Z uppercase, A to Z lowercase, or it can also have $sign. Okay, or it can also have underscore. So yeah, that's basically the thing about it. That's the second rule. Let me show you some examples over here for this. So if I go and create a constant with, let's say, what is the last one I did? Let's make it D, for example. So this works fine for me. And now you know that we can't do 4E, but you can do E4, because the first one has to be from anything between this, but the second one can be anything from this, second or third or fourth, like after first one, anything, any character can be anything among this. Okay, then this would also be allowed. Actually I can give it this as well. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, but what would not be allowed is, for example, this won't be allowed. Okay, because you can't give this inside a variable or constant at all. So these are the rules basically. These are the two main rules I think for creating an identifier name, creating an identifier. Third rule is JavaScript is case sensitive. What that means is that uppercase and lowercase matters. What I mean by that. So see, the thing is that let's say you create a variable with the name of, let's take F for example. Now, as I said, you can't create a variable or constant with the same name again. Why? Because confusion can occur for JavaScript engine. That would, like, if you try to access it later on, then which one you would access? That's one of the confusion that might happen, and that's why you're not allowed to do that. But there's a workaround. Okay, this won't work, but there's a workaround. You can do something like this. So see, when you do something like this, you are allowed to create a variable like that. Now, if you think about it, F is equal to F. The only difference is the uppercase and lowercase part, and that's where the third rule comes. JavaScript is case sensitive, which means both of these things are different. So when you give f, small f and capital F, both are different identifiers, and that's why it is possible to differentiate between them, and that's why it's possible to give the same name with uppercase lowercase thing, right? You can do that, although I won't recommend doing something like this, but just a thing I want to tell you about JavaScript, that it is case sensitive. Okay, so if you try to print the value of f, you would get 4, but if you try to print the value of uppercase F, you would get 5. Okay, and then one more thing over here, I think we can discuss, let's say, like, just to make the example more clear. For example, if I do abc1 and give it a value of 6, and then I do const abc2 or 1 7, then if I try to print the and first of all, you can see both are possible because like they have like uppercase lowercase difference, so it's possible to create with these names, and you can see the values are also properly accessed. Okay, a b, yeah, wait, let me copy it. Yeah, you can see I'm getting the values better. Now the fourth rule over here says identifiers cannot be keywords, reserve keywords. Okay, now what are keywords? Keywords are some reserved words that has some special meaning to JavaScript engine. What that means is that you can't use these keywords in your identifier, like as your identifier. I mean, you can use it in your identifier, but it just can't be the complete identifier. What that means is that you can create a variable like this. This is fine, but this is not fine. Now, why this is not fine? This is not fine because let has a special meaning to JavaScript engine. In this case, let has a meaning of creating a variable. So imagine as a JavaScript engine, if you see this code, you would get confused, right? Because you see two lets over here. Now you see this let and then you see another let. Now the confusion is, this let is for creating another variable, or this is for creating or this is for name of the variable, right? And that's the confusion that would occur, and that's why this is not allowed. The same goes over here. If I try to like print the value of let, you can't do that because let is not defined, and first of all, you can't define that. If you define that, let is a keyword, so you can't print a value of that keyword because let is used to create a variable. It's not itself a variable, right? So yeah, that's the thing. Same goes for const as well. Some other examples for this I would like to give. For example, break. So break is not going to work. Now this sounds like a normal word, but it's a keyword, and that's why you can't use it. This keyword is actually used in loops, which we're going to talk about later on. There's one more keyword used in loop itself, and that is continue. You can't use that as well. Okay, so this won't work too. So yeah, that's basically about keywords. You can't use keywords inside as your variable name. I'm just gonna give you the whole list of keywords. I'm just gonna give you a link of that in the description box. So these are all the list of keywords we have in JavaScript. You can't use any of them inside the program as a variable or constant. Okay, so yeah, that's basically something you need to understand. Last thing, it's not a rule, by the way, camel case. It's not a rule, it's just a convention. Convention means it's the way most developers do in JavaScript. So what we developers do in JavaScript is that we use camel case. So if you know about Python, in Python, mostly like if you see in Python, you would see people giving names like this for variables. Okay, so you can see like some other examples, or maybe like current value. You can see over here that the names are given like this. If like there's a single word, that's fine, but if there's like a multi-word variable, then you give underscore between each word. That's the convention in Python. Okay, You can create a variable like this as well, but you do it like this because that's a convention. Okay, so it's not a rule, it's not gonna cause any kind of issues. Okay. In JavaScript, the convention is camel case. What is camel case? Camel case looks like this. So if you want to do code, you do like this. If you want to do my favorite name, you write my, and then after that, for the next word, you start with capital letter, you end that word, and then for next word, you again start with capital letter. Like this you do. Okay. So yeah, that's the camel case thing. Now, just to prove this, that it's not gonna cause any issues if you're gonna mix the way in which you write the name of the variables. I'm just gonna create some examples here of my favorite name 5, or let's say if I do my favorite name 6. Okay, so you can see there's no issue over here. You can do in any way you want, but the convention is camel case, so better if you follow it. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's all about identifier. That's all the rules about identifier basically. Let's talk about literals now, which is again a very important thing to talk about. So let's copy it over here. Now, as I already told you, whatever value, whatever data you are storing inside a variable or constant, that is called literal. Now in JavaScript, there are like basically, by the way, literal is also called data type. Okay, like literal has a data type. Okay, literal is a value, but value has a data type. Like a value can be a number, a value can be a string, a value can be a boolean. Boolean means true or false. Okay, so it can be anything like that, and that's what data type is called. So we have like two types of data types. They are like categorized between two categories. One is primitive data types and second one is non-primitive composite or reference data types. We are not going to discuss about non-primitive composite reference data types right now. They are a very big topic, like you would have like, a single video on them. Okay, so we are not going to discuss that in this lecture. What we're going to discuss is primitive data types. That too we're going to discuss in later on in detail. Okay, in primitive data types we have number, begint, string, boolean, null, undefined. Symbol we are going to talk about later on again, but yeah, these are the main things that we're going to discuss: number, begint, string, boolean, null, undefined. Okay, these are the main things. Let's talk about each of them one by one. First of all, number. Now numbers are used to represent integer or floating point numbers. Okay, and the range of values that you can use for a number is this, starting from this to this. Okay, what that means is that if you try to exceed this range, then you're going to see some weird behaviors. Now why that happens, there's like a reason for this to happen. We don't need to discuss that reason because that is too deep into the architecture of JavaScript, which is just not required for us, and so we are not going to discuss about it. But basically that's something you need to understand, that you can't exceed this range for numbers. There is a way to exceed it, but that is something we're gonna discuss in some minutes. For now, you just need to understand that you should not pass this range. So let's try to create some number. So let's say const a equal to 4. So you can see when I create a number, I directly write the value of that. Okay, I just say 4, 5, 6, whatever the number is. I can use floating point number as well, which means I can use 4.6. Okay, let me just print the value of it, a and b. Okay, by the way, you can see I'm printing the values together, which is also possible. Like you just give a, then you give comma, then you give the second value you want to print. You can also print the values directly. Okay, but yeah, that's about it. Let's talk about some other values you can store inside it. So there are some special values that are there in JavaScript for number type. One is NaN. Now the name might sound like the name might sound confusing over here, but the meaning of this name, this is basically a short form, by the way, not a name actually. The real meaning of this is not a number. So it's a very weird thing in JavaScript again, that not a number is also a number. Okay, so I know it's a very confusing thing, but just digest it for now. We're gonna discuss it later on in detail. But yeah, that's one of the thing. Then we have infinity. Infinity is a special type of number again. Okay, infinity means a value that is not finite, something that is too large, as you might have read in your math classes. Then the same we have negative infinity for the negative scale of the numbers. So let me just go and show you these things. So const c equal to infinity. So you can see I stored infinity inside a constant, which is possible. Okay, I'm just going to show you a very practical example about infinity later on when we're going to discuss about operators, arithmetic operators. When we're going to discuss about that, I'm going to show you that. Okay, but you can basically go and print the value and you can see it's infinity. Okay, and then you have negative infinity over here. You can print the value of that as well. Then you have not a number. Okay, I'm going to also talk about not a number in detail when we discuss about operators. There I'm going to show you how not a number can occur. Like there are some cases in which not a number occurs, and there are some cases in which infinity occurs. So we'll discuss about all that in operators lecture. For now, you just understand about it, that there is something like this exists in JavaScript. Then finally, exponent numbers are also supported. Now, what I mean by exponent is basically a way in maths to represent like very large numbers. Now, let me actually show you that. You might have studied about this in your maths class. Very large and very small numbers as well. So, for example, I guess I can show you one example over here. So you can see that this number can be written like this. Okay. Now, what's the advantage? The advantage comes when the number is too big. For example, this is a very big number. So you can just write it like this. Okay. So this scientific notation is also supported in JavaScript. Now, let me show you. So, for example, if you see, if I go and let's say I just go and say 3, what was this? 3, 1, 2, 5. And then this. Okay, so 3, 1, 2, 5, and then E, and then we have 3 zeros. So that's what I can do. So you can see when I write this, I get the same number that I saw over there. Okay, or I can go and do something like this: 3.125 E6. Then I also get the same number. Now what is happening over here? To understand this, it's a very easy thing, by the way. It's not a very hard thing to understand. So this basically means 3, 1, 2, 5, and like when you see E over here, this E separates this and this. Okay, so this is called, I think this is called mantissa, and this is called exponent. Okay, so you separate the mantissa over here, and then you say multiply by 10 to the power the exponent, which is 3 in this case, and that gives you 3125000. In this case, again the same happens. You have the mantissa, you get this over here, and then multiply and then 10 to the power 6, and that's how you can get that. So yeah, this is basic maths over here, and that is supported in JavaScript. You can write numbers in this format if the number is too large. Next, let's talk about begins. Now, begins are used to store arbitrary length of numbers. What that means? That means you can store numbers that surpasses the range written over here. The only condition is that it is only able to store integers. So you can actually go and say integers, and that's why it's called bigint, not big numbers. Okay, so it is only possible to store integers with bigint. You can't store literal numbers with bigint. Okay, so yeah, let me actually go and show you an example over here. So as we discussed, it's not possible to store any number that lies above this range. Okay, so let's do a test over here. Let's try to print the value of 2 to the power 53. Now I'm just gonna go and say 2 to the power 53. That gives you this number, so let me actually copy this. Okay, and let's write it over here. Okay, this gave a comma in between which I didn't want. Anyways, let me remove it. Okay, yeah, so we get this number. Okay, so you can see when I do this, you can see some 3 dots below this, and this is saying numeric literal with absolute values equal to this or greater are larger to represent large to be represented accurately as integers. Okay, although I don't see any kind of issues right now, but you are gonna see issues if you store larger than this. So I'm gonna show you how. And by the way, the limit was -1. So the actual value, the max value you can store with number is this. At that place, you can see there is no 3 dots on that. Let's try to make this 3, which means we are going beyond this. So what happens then? Let's see. I do 3 over here. Now what you see over here, when I do this, you can see I still get the same number as this. It's a very strange thing, right? Let's try to increase it even more. And when I do that, you can see this is all fine. This again becomes fine basically. Let's try to make it 5. See, when I made it 5, it became 6. So like it's a very weird thing, right? Let's actually try to increase it too much. You can see now it's again really bad. It's not what I actually wrote over here. So what is happening? So the thing that is happening is that you can only store these values inside the memory as a number accurately. Above or below this range would lead to inaccuracies, as you can see over here. So to avoid this, we can use bigint. Now when I use bigint, again I can just go and say like 1. By the way, let me actually go and make it over here. For example, 1000, 1900 is also fine. You see that works fine. These 2 values work fine, and these values doesn't work fine. Now first of all, how to create a bigint. By the way, this bigint would solve these issues. Okay, these issues. But let's try to see how we can actually go and use them. Now to create a bigint, you need to first of all write a number that you want to store as a bigint. So whatever number you choose, for example I choose this, and then after that you need to put n. Okay, nothing else, you need to put n. That's the rule, and this whole becomes your bigint. Okay, so you're storing 324234 as a bigint, not a number, you're storing it as a bigint. Let's try to get inside a constant. So let's take f here and store it there. Let's try to print the value. You can see I get the value of that constant as this. Okay, now let's try to see if the problem of this gets solved or not with bigints. So I am just gonna go and get these values over here, paste it over here, and then I'm just gonna give n at the end. So I give n at the end. You can see this is same basically, it was same before as well, so there's no difference basically. This would also become same, like there's no difference at all, and it's fine, although like you see n at the end, but the number is stored just like it was stored over here. Although one thing you can see, this 3 dots are gone. Let's try to give n over here, and that is where you're gonna see the magic. Now see this. The number that you give it is stored accurately even when the length exceeds this range. Okay, so that is what I told you. It's able to exactly store the number when you use bigint. This is also fine, this is also fine now, and even this would be fine. See, it's also storing properly. So that's the use of bigint, to store arbitrary length or number. And by arbitrary, I really mean arbitrary. Like this can be literally arbitrary. You can see. Doesn't matter. It's all stored accurately without any inaccuracies over there. And that's the use of bigints. Now mostly these big numbers are usually like very impractical. So sorry, not impractical actually, very rare to have a like scenario where you're using these big values. Mostly you would be fine with the range that number provides you. So until and unless you don't have a use for it, don't use it, and only use it when you have a user for it. Okay, let's talk about string now. Now string is basically used to store collection of characters. Now those characters can be numbers, letters, anything. Everything is allowed in a string. In a number you can just store a number, but in a string you can store a number, you can store a digit, you can store any special character like underscore, at the rate, dollar sign, dot, asterisk, forward slash, anything you can store inside a string. Now there are three ways in JavaScript to create a string: single quote, double quote, backticks. And by the way, there is a difference between all of these approaches. Let's talk about that. So first of all, let's try with this single quote. Okay, so let's make a very constant G single quote to sharp. So you can see I stored that value inside it, and if I try to print that, you can see it's properly printing it. Okay. Now, why I am giving single quote, double quote, or backticks over here? Why just not directly store it like numbers? The reason is, if I try to do this, first of all, you will see it's saying me that I actually, first of all, let me make it H, and then you can see Tushar is not defined. What is happening over here? The thing that is happening over here is that it's thinking that the name given, that the value given over here is not actually the value. You're giving it a variable name, just like you did over here, that you used a variable to assign value to another variable. And that's what the JavaScript engine is thinking, that you're trying to access the value of Tushar variable or constant, and you're trying to assign it to H, and that's why this is failing. So that's why you don't directly give the value of string, and you have to use single take, double quote, or backticks. Single quote, double quote, or backticks. Yeah. So won't work. Okay. Yeah. Then again, you can use double quote as well. So for the same value, I can use double quote, for example. I can just go and console log, that would be the same. Okay. So you might ask, like, what's the difference? There's no difference. That's the reality. There's no difference. It's just upon your preference, whatever you would like to use. I like to use double quote, so I just use that only. But if you like to use single quote, you can just do that. Then finally we have backticks. Now backticks is different and has a use as well. So for backticks, you just go and again, use this, and then you give backticks. Backticks is this, by the way. You can find it below escape key mostly. So you can use that, and then inside that you can give any string. So you can see that's how I did it. And now if I try to print the value, I see the value here. Now what's so special about backticks? There's a special thing about it. Before that, I would just like to show you one last thing over here. As I said, you can store even numbers inside a string, because all of these are characters, so it doesn't matter. So I can actually show you the one example over here. So you can see I'm storing a number inside a string. But just just remember that whatever you stored inside J is still a string. As you can see, like, it gets a single quote around it when I print it, so it's definitely a string. I would prove you that it's a string later on, but for now you can just understand it, that you can store a number inside a string, but that would still be a number. But that still would be a string. Okay. Now let's try to understand the importance of this thing over here. Okay. What is the importance of this? The importance of backticks can be shown over here. For example, if I have a variable name, let's say Tushar, and then I have, let's say, age 20. Now I want to create a string that says my name is Tushar and my age is 20. What I can do, I can just go and either do this final string with double quote. So I can just go and say my name is, and then I give a plus over here, and then I say name, and then I go and say, and my age is this. So you can see what I did. I just did this, write the string, then give a plus, and then write the variable name, which is variable or constant name, which is name, and then I just went ahead and gave another string, and then I gave the age. what is happening over here is that all of these things would get combined to form one string. Okay, so just to show that, you will see my name is Tushar and my age is 20. And by the way, I can just even add like a full stop at the end. Okay, and by the way, you can see age was a number, but it at the end became a part of a string when you combined all of these things together. So I'm using plus operator. By the way, I'm going to talk about operators later on, but this is called a concatenation operator, which joins strings together. Okay, so that's basically about the about how you can actually create the string with double quote. But let me show you one more alternative which can be done with backticks, and that's where the backticks become helpful. So you can see if I do final string with backticks, now I can just go and do something like this. So what I did over here, just to make it very clear, what I did was that I just wrote backticks and then I said my name is, and then instead of like ending the string over here and giving a plus operator, I just gave dollar and then curly braces, and then inside that I wrote like a variable or constant name, and then I closed that with the curly braces, and then I gave the rest of the string, and then again another placeholder over here for age, and then I gave dot and then ended the backtick string. Now if I try to print the value of it, you would still see the same thing, but you can already see which one is more readable. This one is more readable than this, and obviously this approach of this is much more easier to go through. Okay, and yeah, by the way, I can just like even directly give the values over here. Okay, so for example, if I try to do this, I can actually go and do something like this. Let me actually go and say my name and my age is okay. So I can actually go here and directly write the name over here without writing the variable name or constant name, and then I can do the same over here, that I can just write the value directly, which is also possible. You can see that goes inside it. Okay, so yeah, that's how you can like use the that's how you can use backticks. Then we have booleans. Boolean is basically like a value which is either true or false. So you can say like const I is there already taken. So let's take k true, j false. So you can see these are the only possible values for booleans. Okay, j is already declared. Let me take I. L. Yeah. So you can see that's the only two values that are possible for booleans. And by the way, it might look like a collection of characters, and you might say that okay, no, you should not do that because it might again get confused over here. It won't, because this is basically a keyword. You see, false is a keyword, true is a keyword. So anyways, JavaScript knows that this can't be used as a name, so it allows writing it like this. So hopefully this is logical to you. And let me go and print the values over here, and you can see true and false. Okay, both are booleans, not string. Okay, that is something you need to understand. One practical example for that is like can vote, for example. Okay, so true or false, so maybe true, and I just go and print the value over here. So yeah, that's it. Log. So that's how you can use booleans. Now finally, let's talk about null and undefined. Now null and undefined are basically two different values. You can actually go and do this. So const const m equal to null, const n equal to undefined. You can print that. So again, null is a keyword, if you see over here, and that's why you are allowed to enter it without even giving a double quote or single quote, right? So that's why you're allowed to do it. Okay, so yeah, now let's talk about the difference between these two things. And by the way, you also know one more thing, that if I go and do something like this, if I create a variable without giving it a value, I get undefined into it, which is the same undefined you see over here. Now what's the difference? What's the actual difference between null and undefined? The difference is that null means intentional absence of a value, whereas undefined means that variable has not been assigned any kind of value yet. Now, What that means is, it's very simple to understand it. And actually, I'm going to talk about this very soon when we talk about modifying value of variables and constants. But for now, you just digest this fact that null means intentional absence of value, and undefined means variable has not been assigned any value. Now, you might find people like discussing about this on forums, and people like arguing on this topic, and I don't really care about what they say. I am just gonna show you what ECMAScript specification says, because as I said in the first video, in the introduction video, as I said, ECMAScript is the place where you can find the truth about all the JavaScript related concepts. It's the place from where JavaScript engines implement their engine. So let's go there and see what ECMAScript specification says. It's basically, by the way, says the same, but let's still go over there. So let's see that. So you can see over here that I opened the ECMAScript 2025 specification. There you can see that undefined value means that primitive value used when a variable has not been assigned any value. Okay. Whereas null means that you did an intentional absence of any value, which means the value is intentionally absent. Whereas undefined means you didn't give it any value. And that's why you see, when you give a variable if you create a variable without giving it any value, you get undefined into it. Now let's try to understand about null as well after understanding about modifying value of variables and constants. So for now, I'm just going to copy this and paste it inside literals. Now let's talk about this thing over here, modifying value of variables and constants. So let's take an example. I have let's say f. I hope, okay, f is also taken. H, okay, I took h for example over here, and you can see that I just try to print the value of it. H is 10. Now what if I want to change the value of it? What I can do in that case, I can just go and say the name of the variable or constant. Actually, variables can only be changed, but yeah, I mean, like, you just give the name of the variable, identifier of the variable, and then you say equals to, and then you assign it the new value. So in this case, I'm just going to make it 20, and then if I try to print the value over here, you can see it's 20 now. Before this line it was 10, after this line it is 20. Okay. So yeah, that's how you can change the value. So you can see I'm using the name of the variable to change the value, and so it's important that you give a proper name, because you need to use that name to identify it for changing the value or accessing the value. Now the same can't be done with constant, as I've already told you. If I try to do this, and then if I try to change it to 20 for example, that can't be done. I can print that, I can print that again. Basically, you can see it fails with this error, assignment to constant variable won't work. So you still have that value of 10. Okay. Now that is about like modifying the value of variable with constant. One more thing, JavaScript is dynamically typed language. What I mean by that? JavaScript is dynamically typed language. That means whatever variable or constant you create, the value inside that can be changed to a different data type value. Okay. So for example, we have already discussed like different data type values like string, null, undefined, numbers, booleans, big ints, and everything else. I can change a value of a variable to any type of value after I have created the variable. So for example, in this case, h had a value of number. Even after new value, h had a value of number. You can see h is of type number. Let's do one thing. Let's make h to sharp. So you can see when I do that, it's possible. I'm not getting any kind of issues. I can make it true, for example. Again, I won't get any kind of issues. Okay. Yeah. I can make it like begin. I won't get any kind of issue. I can make it null. That should be fine too. And I can make it undefined. That should be fine too. Okay. So that's how you can change it to any data type value, and that's why JavaScript is called dynamically typed language, because it doesn't care about the data type that is stored inside the variable. Now this is different from some other languages, like Python is again like dynamically typed, but languages like C, C++, Java, all these are like statically typed, which means you need to provide a proper type when you're creating a variable. You need to tell it that what kind of value it will store. Okay, so if you tell in the creation of variable that it will store integer values, then it can only store integer values. You can't change it to strings, for example. Now this might look cool and you might think that's a good thing, but it's sometimes a bad thing, and it can actually cause a lot of confusions, plus it can cause bugs as well. And that's why we have something called TypeScript, which we can have again like another series for that. It's a thing that actually provides types in JavaScript so that you don't do these kind of things. You can't, like, for example, if you in TypeScript you can tell that okay, you want to make this variable only accept a number, then you can't change it to a string. So that kind of thing you can do with TypeScript, which we're gonna talk about later on. But I think that's about dynamically typed nature of variables and constants in JavaScript, and that's how you can modify a value of variable and constant. By the way, one last thing over here. If I do I is taken, I think, yeah. J I think should be fine, yeah. So if I take J and don't give it any value, you already know we would get undefined. Now I can actually go and make it J equal to 4, and then you can see I get the value of 4. Okay, and that's why you are able to, and that's why I said earlier, right, that you can't create a constant without value, because later on you can't change a value of constant, but you can do that for variable, because later on you can change the value of variable from undefined to any proper value you want. And that's why I was able to create a variable without any value, because later on I can change the variable value like this. Finally, talking about undefined null, which we were talking about, what's the difference between it? So you can see when I create a variable without any value, that gets undefined. But let's say I want to empty a variable, what I can do in that case? In that case, you use null. So what you can do J equal to null, and then you have J as null. Now, what is the use of emptying a variable? You would not understand it right now. It's something we're gonna understand later on. A very practical use I'm gonna tell you later on for this. But basically, that's what null is for. If you want to empty a variable, you just assign it to null. Then it won't have any value. Null means no value. Undefined means value is not yet assigned. Okay, that's the difference between undefined and null. Null means you intentionally empty the variable. Undefined means it has not been given any kind of value. Even after that, you can see weird things that you are able to assign a value of undefined directly to a constant or variable, which is something you should not do. Like, there's no reason why you would do something like this. Okay. So yeah, that's about it. The only important thing over here is that don't use undefined for emptying a variable. Okay. The thing that you have to use for emptying a variable is null. Okay. So yeah, that's about variables and constant. I think that's all we need to understand about it. Let me know if you have any questions about this. I would love to answer that in the comment section below. And yeah, that's all for this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.